Good evening one, good evening all, and welcome one more time to your show here on Sankofa Evening Drive. Right here, late in the evenings and Fridays. You must be sitting around at home. But at this time, because of Corona, you cannot say you've been working unless you are one of those fortunate ones in the space of essential services. But we're here again on your Sankofa program, reflecting backwards where we're coming from, a bit of conversation as to where we are and where we are going. And here we bring you real people to discuss real issues from the top side, bottom side, getting voices, the old and young professionals and the commoners. The whole idea is we want to get true and honest opinions about the issues of life. I would not find a better guest for you today, but our fine young man here. And I cannot say much about marital status until he divulges himself. Otherwise, I was going to sell him off the shelf. We're fine young man here, Dr. Vaughan Perry or Vaughan Perry, all the way from the University of Johannesburg, is it?
Wits.
University of Wits here in South Africa,
Yeah.
where he's actually a lecturer, a teacher, a scholar in the space of human anatomy and virology, communicable, non-communicable diseases, you know, all these complicated things. And when you go to school, you bite your tongue backwards. And being in the season of Corona, we thought we'd bring you a professional, an academic, who could actually maybe tiptoe us through maybe the plight that we're going through. And I hope I can squeeze him hard and get some few technical advices as to how can we keep alive during this extreme time of stress. We are all stressed, guys. We are stressed, man. This Corona thing, social distancing. I don't know how we can distance ourselves from our wives, but it looks like this is becoming a reality by the day. Welcome and greet some viewers at home there. And who is Vaughan Perry? Where does he come from? And
Firstly, Bishop, thank you for having me.
Blessings.
Thank you for having me. Vaughan Perry. Vaughan Perry from Pretoria. As your name, the name suggests, of colored descent in the family. So Vaughan Perry from Pretoria. I'm an academic. I'm an academic. I love the human body and its intricacies. It's a fascination to me that I'm every day trying to learn. So that's who I am, basically. I'm fascinated with the human body, how it works, how it's maintained. You know, yeah.
Wow. So you're in the Department of Biology,
Anatomical
Sciences.
Sciences, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that is my field, anatomy. So I'm looking mainly at gross anatomy. So when you're talking gross anatomy, you're talking mainly.
I'm a student today, so you take me through. I love learning. So.
Yeah, so we're just talking big structures. You know, we're talking big structures in terms of veins. We're not necessarily looking at the cellular level. Although when I because an academic, you know, part is teaching, you know, and that is what I'll probably teach gross. But the other...
You call it gross?
Gross anatomy. So gross isn't gross, yeah. Gross. It's more bigger, right? Macroscopic. The other part of teaching, from teaching, is research. You know, and now when I look at the research, I tend to go a bit more macroscopic in my view. And what I look at, and mainly is, I look at bone, how bone is affected by different non-communicable diseases. So normally, my previous work was in fetal alcohol syndrome.
Fetal
alcohol syndrome.
Take note, some of us are laymen here. So fetal alcohol syndrome, you're looking at the behavior of a fetus, which is sitting in a womb of a mother who is drinking.
Yes.
Basically,
exposed to alcohol.
Take us to maybe just say one or two things. What are the issues? What are some of the issues that?
Firstly, it's a huge issue. Firstly, South Africa is one of the biggest alcohol consuming parts, right? The issue not necessarily only being in quantity, but also in pattern. You know, in pattern, where we do what is called binge drinking a lot. So we took that and we looked at, just because we obviously knew that there are a number of effects that come from drinking alcohol and the fetus being exposed to it intrauterine, within the uterus. So we were like, okay, cool. There are these three main ones that we've looked at. Normally, what you note from fetal alcohol syndrome is dysmorphic changes in the face, right?
Where we put in a pusa face.
Yeah, not necessarily a pusa face, but you'll see the thin lip, you know. And when you watch it, you know, you'd notice those little symptoms, changes, those little things within the face. There will be there'll be a change within the mental faculties and how they function. You know, in terms of I hate the word intelligence, but you know, generally the function of the mental faculties.
Okay, is this reduced?
It's reduced.
It's more polite,
right? In more polite terms, it's reduced. Then the third thing we note is change in size. So now what I looked at,
Wow.
I wanted to look at, I said, well, I wanted to say, okay, what happens in this change of size? What happens to the bones? So that's what we based our research in mainly within that. But South Africa has one of the greatest numbers of occurrences of fetal alcohol syndrome globally.
So we end up having small children, not
short
because they are
stature,
small, but simply because they were
you know,
predisposed to
alcohol intolerance. So we did that. We looked at that within an animal study with the fetus being exposed to alcohol, and looked at the different
it's quite interesting.
aspects of that. And yeah, that was quite interesting. But I think it's obviously one conversation that still needs to continue within the South African context. You know, when you start to look at pattern of drinking and behavior, you know, there is a history. You know, things don't just happen.
Yes,
you know,
psychological underlying factors.
Underlying factors, you know, and which are also very interesting to just see how these things have happened throughout time. You know, orchestrated throughout time. How they affect.
Wow, that's quite interesting. So when you're looking at a population of South Africa with about 55, 60 million people plus, and the alcohol consumptions are at all-time highs, if we are one of the highest in the southern part of the continent,
yes.
What sort of community do you see being built by this, both from a fetal perspective and a community perspective, as a professional, as an academic? No emotions here. No emotions. Just a professional view. What kind of a society do you think we're breeding with such amount of huge? I mean, the other day when this young man was killed in America, that's the day they opened up liquor for another day. I literally saw our guys there with the Amasiyon form.
Bishop, I'll tell you from multiple maybe points of views as well with regards to that. I grew up I'm from a ethnically to say a colored home, right? So that is also maybe I guess in behavior and the likes. And one thing you will know, you look at the demographics, is the great use of alcohol. So it's something that, besides from an academic standpoint, that I've had to, you know, come and see how it affects my life, you know, directly and things like that. But just maybe just if we just an overview, a general view from a community point of aspect, it is obviously, you know, taking the wheels of the car. You know, basically taking the car apart spanner by spanner. You know, it's been introduced throughout the whole family unit. You know, you can imagine the destruction that just brings out. Besides looking at the medical and physical effects, you know, in terms of like biologically, but just what it does in terms of morale, you know, ethics in the space. There's a lot of damage.
There's this popular discussion that is around the marketplace these days is Africans, where Pan-Africans, Al-Kebulam, and all the black people are trying to find and reestablish their own biology, so to speak. Because initially, I mean, as a theologian, there was a time where there were some black people had to be cut open. Because the white men did not believe that the black man had a soul.
Yes.
So they literally they chipped
or
through.
There must be a difference.
So they wanted to cut inside and find if they will find something inside the black person that made them different. But having grown up a little bit now, I know something called melanin. So maybe can you just give us, what is this melanin story that we hear about? Is a scholar in that space to tell us what are the virtues, values found in this melanin?
I can just touch on that briefly, you know, in my studies briefly. That, you know, but now you have to now come into a conversation of origin, you know, and of origin of sort of the species.
You're on Sankofa. Take us there.
Right.
Take us there.
Origin of the species being from sort of Central Africa, you know, and then having this migration, you know, into the northern parts of the globe and the southern parts of the globe. And vitamin D being important, you know, for the body, and how it's absorbed from the skin, you know, that process being very important. And you have the mutation, or you have the adaptation, you know, or the adoption of melanin, or the loss of melanin as time goes, you know, to just try sort out that gradient. But also, melanin also serves to also sort of like as a thermal buffer. I remember a while back reading on research that was done in one of these, I think it has to be European, very, very cold countries, but they use guinea pigs. And they had these guinea pigs just spotted, you know, a bit of melanin, and they were just exposing them to different thermal temperatures, you know. Less melanin, you'll get colder quicker, You know, sorry, not less melanin, you'll get colder quicker.
Okay.
Less melanin, it'll take time for you to get that cold.
Okay.
You know, but equally, melanin, it will be easier for you also to deal with the sun when you're being exposed to the sun. It's easier for you to deal with the sun as opposed to that. So you see it as an adaptation.
Okay.
You know, in that sense. And listen, it can even go further into, you know, if people want to talk evolution, you know, you can even go back into that as well. But it's mainly an adaptation that you see.
Does it make a difference that more melanin you are, the more human you are, the less you are? I'm saying emotionally, psychologically. What is this? There's this notion that with
it's unfortunate, you know, it's unfortunate, and unfortunately, firstly, the simple question to that is no. There is no difference. Your makeup and anatomically, you know, everything is the same. We have, you know, and you look at variation, and we have, maybe I guess as well, maybe an anatomical level, we have looked at some variations in adaptation. So we look at the skull mainly, you know, there's a lot of work that's been done on the skeleton, you know, to look at the differences between a Caucasian skull, you know, versus an African, Asian, you know, and the likes. And there are slight variances there, and therefore, like, that's where the field of forensic anthropology comes in, where people use that to create profiles, you know, to say, but no, man, looking at such landmarks on the skull.
This makes a difference. But intrinsically speaking, when you're looking at an African and you're looking at a European, in terms of skeletons or in terms of texture of being, what would be the main differentiating factors between the two?
Melanin. And that'll be the main differentiating factor. And as I mentioned, you will have, at the skeletal level, you will have ratio, but that now goes into ancestry, you know, ancestry and just how those sort of things develops, instead of more a difference in creation or being or formation.
Okay. Let's go to the beach. Okay. You find black people who use sunscreen. you know, because you know, I've never stopped wondering. You find these guys at the beach now got some whitish stuff on their face. They don't want to burn in the sun. You know, is it really necessary for a person? I mean, look. I
will be honest. I will be honest with you, Bishop. I found myself literally last year, for the first time in my life, needing to use sunscreen.
Okay.
You know, it's you know, the world of the human body and how it is. It's forever dynamic. It's forever shifting. You know, and just observing is very interesting, even in myself. Since when did my skin not? You know, I ran the whole day. I grew up in the streets running the whole day. You know, and I was fine. But it's very interesting, and that's maybe one thing I'd really like to look at and try to see what is happening. You know, what is happening to the person, maybe even in that aspect. What is happening to the skin that it's becoming so sensitive to sunlight? I mean, there's things like, you know, I grew up, I've never heard of lactose intolerant until I was well into my 20s. You know, now every second person I meet is lactose intolerant. You know, for me, there's a certain change in, you know, that it would be very interesting. It's very interesting to just try go into and just figure that out.
On this program, we also cover quite a bit of grounds in terms of agriculture and diet and stuff like that, and how that kind of affects the African child in our modern space. And looking at the colonial regime that introduces to us all sorts of plastic foods, and most likely more an exacerbated consumption. We used to eat meat. We used to eat, drink milk. But it was in traditional spaces. It used to be done on festivities, holidays, and etc. Now, with an abundance, almost like every 3, 4, 5, 6. In some certain homes, it's almost like a daily. In your own observation, when you look at the shift in diet with the African body and its anatomy, what do you think diet has? What sort of role has modern diet played? Because I want to look at. You've mentioned alcohol, which you can put a peg on that. So I want us to pick up the next one, which would be the diet aspect. How is that affecting and impacting the African body?
I think one of the things you will find in Africa, we do not have, so that is what I'm also working on, my PhD. And so now I'm looking at alcohol, diabetes, and we're looking at ARVs and how those are affecting bone. One of the things you note is that Africa does not have the highest stats maybe in like lifestyle diseases such as diabetes. They don't have the highest stats, but they have the highest growth rates. you know. So it's telling you that they're not as high as these guys, but they are growing incrementally more than these guys. What is happening? And that has to do with that. We have this development or this westernized lifestyle coming in, you know, which is less sedentary, high sugar intake, low fiber, you know, and that's creating all these lifestyle diseases. You name them, hypertension, diabetes, and the likes.
Top 5 killers.
You know, we hardly walk anywhere anymore. You know, you hardly walk anymore. So that's already, you can see that coming in on the public health space, just coming in and becoming an effect to black people, you know, in that regards. There's also a very interesting notion that I've never really looked into, but you always see it in media. You know, if you consume American media about black people, is that they're thought to be more prone to diabetes and hypertension. You know, it's a very interesting a thing to look at all those different things that still happen. But particularly in South Africa, I will tell you that we have a lot of westernization happening that is affecting our diet,
also
affecting
impacting us
our
directly.
body. Yeah.
We have Dr. Vaughan Perry here with Vaughan Perry with us on our Sankofa program here. When we come back, I would like him to take us through some opportunistic diseases and the predisposition of the African body in terms of how do we also deal and cope with some of the problems that we are facing here in Africa, and he's with us here to take us through some interesting perspectives. Don't go away. We'll be back right after the break. Your host Maponga J, your program is Sankofa.
Hello. Being a legal practitioner in South Africa in these challenging times demands lawyers that will help clients beyond legal issues. The ever-changing demands in commerce and tourism require lawyers who have sound and clear business and commercial knowledge, and that's where BHsc Incorporated comes in. Our business, mining, tourism, health, labor, and economic knowledge encapsulated with law and litigation experience gives us an advantage in the legal sphere. Our experience in assisting businesses, government, and various industries with their needs puts us amongst the many progressive and striving law firms in South Africa. Now, to contact our attorneys for assistance with any of the mentioned fields and others, please call us on 012-341-4187 or send us an email on admin@chabangu.co.za. BHsc Incorporated, where problems meet solutions.
God is so amazing.
Feel the heat.
The Bible says that through his death on the cross, we are now reconciled with our Father.
Forgive and you shall be forgiven.
So wherever God takes us, we're just excited about it.
As a child of God, where you are, you must have an hour of prayer.
Feel the excitement.
In the name of Jesus, in the name of Jesus.
I believe that God is working right now.
Feel the heat with Starsat.
Welcome back one, welcome back all to your program here, Sankofa, with Mr. Perry here sitting with us, Vaughan Perry, taking us through some biology pieces, and our interest is the African body and how it is responding. We have touched on alcoholism and consumption of alcoholism, giving us some Down syndromes and other issues and other manifestations in terms of the children that are born of alcoholism. We want to tap a little bit on the dietary issues. And for now, I want to maybe just give us a small little rundown as a person who works in the anatomical space. The season we are in and the time we're in, Corona is a big conversation out there. Maybe just from your own corner, what is the difference between Corona and influenza and flu and colds? And how did we end up here being scared of number 19? And if there is 19, there must be 18, there must be 17, there must be 16. Maybe I've COVID-5 when someone is struggling with COVID-19, you know.
So I think when we're talking COVID-19, you know, from the little research I've looked into, when we're talking COVID-19, we're talking about a virus called SARS-CoV-2. Now, SARS basically just stands for severe acute respiratory syndrome. So we're talking about.
I thought we were talking about text now. I wanted to go. I thought you were talking about SARS. I almost was looking for my.
Did you get your return? No, so we're basically looking at the breathing, you know, the lungs, you know, and I think that
respiratory
problem, you know, and I think 2000. I might have my date wrong. 2012 and the years back, we already had SARS-CoV, which happened. Which was the big scare, you know, if you think back with the SARS. And then there was the Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome virus as well that happened. And then now we have the SARS-CoV-2. It's very similar to the two that have already happened in terms of how it goes into the cell. Because remember, it's a virus. The virus needs to get into a cell just in the same way that an HIV virus would have to get into a cell or the influenza virus would have to get into a cell. So in the mechanism in which it gets into the cell, you know, it's very similar to the ones that have happened, and in just following it, maybe if you can say genealogy, it follows those viruses. It has a bit more affinity to the cell than the others. It has a bit more affinity, so therefore, it is a new thing to deal with because it means that what we've been using for these two, you know, in terms of antibody detection, is not the same. You know, so you need to start from the very beginning into understanding, firstly, how is this one different? What genetics make it up and what makes it different? And then finally, once you've been able to isolate that, then you can now start finding ways, you know, to try to target that and isolate.
You need to help me as a layman here. Well, I can't understand that a vaccine has been found, yet cure has not been, you know. How does this work?
You know,
I mean, how have you already cultured a vaccine?
A vaccine,
before
you know, and you know, I had a issue with. I was talking to a friend of mine. You know, he's more in the chemical field, and he was also just sharing the idea that he just is really angry at the approach. You know, the approach to try.
Well, I mean, for a layperson, you make it look spooky.
Yeah,
that okay, you already have a solution here, but prior to us actually giving us the prescription, and
which is so. I think when I was talking to my friend, his issue was that. Why are we so orientated on finding the solution in the vaccine and not the cure per se?
My point.
You know, because the vaccine suggests that I inoculate you with the virus, you know, to then try and help you immune to it. You know, whereas if we find a way to just eradicate it, you know, without having to inoculate, I think that is his argument in that regard. But it's a very scary one. It's a very interesting one to see how it's going to play out, you know, because also you must remember science does not happen in isolation either. You know, there's politics.
Yes.
Always
actually, on that one, I would push another one, the politics of disease. Because if you look at HIV, that has been here for the past 30 years, if not 35 years. I don't know. Help me here. Do we have a vaccine for HIV now?
Nothing.
Vaccine?
We used to have clinical trials that were happening, but those fell through, I think, last year or something like that. But there were clinical trials, but that fell through.
This one strikes in 3 months. And we actually are talking vaccine trials for Hotre Square Hospital, like literally in 180 days, 200 days, turnaround time. Are we really serious about African health? I will allow you some latitude to say, give us the politics of disease.
You know, I'll yeah, you know, let me go on and maybe bite my tongue. There is money in medicine, you know, and that's simply to say, in the same way there's money in gold and diamond.
Even in Texas there's money in transport.
You know, but immediately because there's so much power in that money, the corruption that then happens in that space, you know. Now you would not know to which extent it goes beyond, and one can then form theories around the extent in which it spills over to. But I think one can never be ignorant to the presence of those influences that are more monetary than seeking the health of the general public, you know, and then one has to admit that within that frame and try their best, you know, to still work with what they're within the framework that they have. But you cannot just overlook. You cannot overlook the hand of capital.
Okay. If you would look back into the past, where we're coming from, rural, indigenous African people, and you look at the modern African person who is now living in carpets, glass houses, and etc. If you had a chance of going back to the past, and I would say pick for me 3 things from ancient times that you'd want to transport into modernity, what would be those 3 critical issues? Just maybe 3. I know there could be more, but just maybe 3. If I could take you back in 1600, 1500,
what would I want?
There you are in a primitive space. I just want to become creative. I'm an artist, by the way. So,
well, firstly, I think I would like diet.
Food is first.
I would like diet.
Diet and food.
I would, and maybe this is just because I'm in this space now, in this.
You understand it better now.
But I would want spirituality from them and understanding spirituality. I would want that.
Spirituality, you would take it with you? Yes.
What I would want from them, besides spirituality as well, maybe I would want origins, man. I don't know how to put it. Maybe origins or history. I don't know. I would want origins from
roots.
them.
You want plug in and
yes. That's what I would want from them. I think diet, the spirituality. And then
diet and roots. The rest can follow after that.
Yeah, we can navigate, I think, with that. The rest we can just navigate through.
What makes those 3 things critical? What makes those 3 roots, your diet and your spirituality? How do you think that, because in as much as it is lost, we are alive. So by you mentioning diet, we have a diet. By you mentioning spirituality, we have spirituality. By you mentioning roots. So what would you think, what difference will it make if those 3 items would be brought with us to the front?
I think there's just one thing that we're noticing. I think also, like, firstly in health science, I think with the idea of research happening, there's an idea of people's lifespans being increased. But I think there was just a certain quality of life, that just came from their physical wellness, and that just came from their diet, that we are missing in this day and age. I think from the wellness, I think I would like to see biologically an African that is unadulterated, by anything foreign. That'll be.
No vaccination.
Diet.
Drinking from rivers, eating
that'll
food.
That'll be very fascinating to see, how that system is behaving, and then how just also navigates its terrain. So that's the one reason for diet. Spirituality, I would want to know just how they navigate their moral compass. I think I'd find that, their moral comfortability. I'd want to know where they find themselves comfortable morally, where they find themselves uncomfortable, and then where that came from. So I think I'd get that from their spiritual, aspect, just to understand, hey, how did you model that? Origins, I think I would like to know about the story of intersection. I would have liked to know if this tribe is from here, its movement from here, and its
You're talking about migrations and other
migration.
things.
I'd want to understand those interactions that might have happened there. That history, as we have it, could probably not narrate. Those small nuances of certain interactions. I just want to understand that, and I think that gives one an understanding. When you understand what something has interacted with throughout its course.
While we are transiting to the next section, I want you just maybe to take me through. I might have primitive knowledge on the human anatomy. How is it made up of? What are the systems? What are the key systems that make up the human body?
Okay, I think we have a number of systems. So, firstly, we'll maybe start with the integumentary system, which is more like just the things that sort of hold things together. I think you can think about them as the things that put together. You can look into the skeletal system, which is the bones.
Bone structure.
Serve to give structure, to things for the muscular system, the muscles to attach to. Be a site where blood is being produced. Protect, it's vital things. Then you can go into your circulatory system, which function is to then take oxygen that comes from our respiratory system, from our lungs, take that oxygen, feed it to the muscles and every organ that needs to function, And once it's used that oxygen and now it's a byproduct, take that, bring it back to the lungs. That's the function of the circulatory system. And then we have the nervous system. The nervous system says now, let's balance this person with the external, the internal, and what needs to transpire between him. You know, so that's the nervous system, balancing this, making the conscious awareness of your external, your interaction with your external, the balance of your internal, and you know how it moves around. That'll be mainly your nervous system, just working around that. So I think those are mainly generally the systems you'll look at when you're looking at the body.
When we come back after the break, we're going to turn all this conversation into a proper political conversation as to how can Africa as a body, how can Africa as a system begin to communicate with itself? What quality of food? Not longer as a body this time. Remember, this is an intelligent program. No longer as a body, but now looking at the continent of Africa as one solid human body. The question is, what are we breathing? What are we eating? And how are we standing? What's our nervous system? And what are the factors that are influencing us? And above everything else, how is this intoxication with democracy? What type of children is it producing? Don't go away. We'll be back right after the break. Yeah, before we took over the break, I was getting my small little lesson here on the skeletal system, respiratory system, you know, nerves and everything else, brushing up my biology. I can't remember when was I in biology class. That was 1980, 83, thereabouts, some ages ago. But just before we get into my meat, where I really want to squeeze you a bit tight, what are the effects of wearing masks? Honestly, I know it's a health issue. I know the government is saying we must wear masks. I know this corona thing. But from a professional perspective, when you are putting on that mask, what quality of air are you breathing? What are the effects of wearing a mask?
No, listen, I think I would not know the background research into this, but because personally that mask is a mask I normally live with in the lab, like 24, you know, I'll be in the 12 hours, 8 hours in the lab with that mask. You're firstly breathing, you're going to be breathing fine air, but I think the main issue here is just in the best way, you know, to try stop contact. You know, they're just trying to use the best limiting factors to try stop contact, you know, because of the after effects that happens from contact. But I think that is the main idea there, is to try stop contact. You know, if we can just put these barriers in between, the chances are increased. I'm
happy. Let's get down to our business. I want you just to torture you a bit. Maybe preparing you for your doctorate. I'll grill you a bit.
Please.
Yes. So we take the knowledge that you have now in terms of biology and etc. And I want us to transform and translate that knowledge into an intelligence of how do we diagnose African issues using your biological knowledge. This for me becomes very, very important, because it allows us a fresh perspective into solving problems. Because we always have politicians thinking they're going to be solving problems. But for example, when you are solving a problem medically, you want to diagnose it, then there's just prognosis, then prescription. It gives you a process. Now a politician comes who does not understand how a process works, and they start off with a vaccine at the end. And for me, this messes up my head. So I want to pick... I've sat with a couple of top politicians and etc. But for now, to have a biologist sit with me, I would love to hear clean, fresh perspectives. So Africa is a body, a full body that we have. And I want you to take your biological knowledge and focus into this body. Firstly, how do you think Africa must work if you're supposed to use your biological knowledge into diagnosing and making Africa a healthy body?
You know, firstly, Bishop, it's maybe understanding. Firstly, you remember, if you're going to talk about it as a body,
yes,
remember Africa is already thought of as already an ailing body.
Yes,
remember,
sick body.
It's already a sick body, and what is introduced into it, you know, to help it function is democracy. You know, it's introduced to then help the sick body to then, you know, slowly build back a system. I'm not a philosopher, but you know, I live in the world, so sometimes I'm faced with actually maybe questioning things. And for me, then I sit back and I wonder, you know, is is the medicine that we're taking for this supposed sickness.
And the sickness, is it a placebo or is it actually a reality?
I'm about to get,
you may start diagnosing
yes.
a body that you, because
now,
you assume.
Now, I'm about to get to that part. Firstly, is this medicine that I'm taking, which is this democracy and this system, firstly, is it working? Secondly, this sickness that is in here, that is in this body.
That is assumed.
First, it's assumed. But if it is there. What is causing it? You know, and I think you'll find that the very authority that is giving you the medicine is causing the sickness. You know, so I think then we then need to maybe then look at then how we solve the sickness in that case. And I don't really think, I'm not sure, you know, if the African leadership is ready to maybe then confront the possibility that the medicine that, because they are also maybe beneficiaries of this medicine that we are being served as a country, or as a continent, rather. They are beneficiaries of that. So I'm not sure they are comfortable, you know, with doing away and chucking that aside and saying, well, let's then come back with a better system that might work for Africans. So in that sense, yeah.
So if I'm supposed to put those stethoscopes, what do you call those things put on your ears?
Stethoscopes.
Yeah, if I'm supposed to put a stethoscope for you and I put Africa here as a body, which part of that anatomy do you think is mostly affected, and why?
Oh, for me, it'll always be the mind of it, the nervous system. It'll always be that. You know, the nervous system for me, and even that's one of my favorite parts that I love teaching. I love teaching it. It shows you the power of it's the power of the mind. You know how something in the mind turns physical, and in the case of Africa, so many things have turned physical for Africa. You know, or have come to fruition. You know that the poverty in Africa. You know, it's because of that. But that sickness as well, or that issue there, I think it's been implanted personally. You know, and it then just also then comes out as these different things. So you solve poverty, you solve sickness, you solve all these things, but you have not really dealt with the true issue.
The root cause.
With the root cause. And I think that for me, that'll be the biggest part. Because if I go back, I think if Africans really understand, you know, and that's one a journey I'm also into myself. You know, I'm getting deeper into this journey and trying to understand that there has to have been a science before the science we have now. And I'm just curious as to what that science was.
No, I mean, I bumped some few shoulders with the great Kemetic knowledge systems of Egypt and alchemy, and even as early as the 1700s, that actually Africans were cracking craniums and opening brains and doing brain surgeries.
Right.
You know, moving their hands on top of a pregnant woman and being able to move and align child delivery. Complicated sciences, it
you know, so I think, and it's lost, and it's lost, or it's hidden, whichever one you want to use. But I think it will be so powerful. You know, it will be a powerful tool in our hands to have that. It will be a great powerful tool.
A great tool to have.
It will be a powerful one.
And if for young people, for young people that are listening to you out there, as a professional person, and you would want to say over and above them managing, developing, improving their minds in terms of dealing, because we have education, for example, that claims that it is dealing with the mind. But by the time you come back with the mind, your hands are so weak.
Yeah.
You can't even feed yourself. Then you have these other guys who say, no, we're going to develop your hands. Your hands are so strong, but then you can't think. There seems to be just a constant disjoint between our education system, our practical application of that education system, and the interaction of the whole thing to make it functional. We end up having resources, but dysfunctional. And from you as a professional, if you're supposed to look and diagnose the African problem, over and above the mental hemorrhage or mental deficiencies or mental breakdown, whatever you might want to call it, how best do you think we can actually synchronize, bring some symbiosis between the various structures of community? This is economics, this is politics, this is religion, and create for yourself what you might call a holistic, functional African body.
That is a very tough one. And firstly, I just maybe want to come into the education. You know, the education. I think you touched the nerve there for me. Personally, I'm from Atutru, Township boy. In truth, my academic path. I was always fascinated, but my academic path on my part is mainly one of grace. I'm just always amazed at the opportunity that is before me, right? But if you look at it and then look at it in just the general space, the South African space, and you know, I'd like to go back to that young man, you know, and then those young men in that space and understand how that opportunity might not be in place, right? But even with that opportunity being afforded, you know, somehow, I think the issue then becomes the quality of the education, you know. And I was part of the age, you know, in the University of the Witwatersrand.
I'm at 2000.
You know that the fees must fall. Hey, you know, and one of the biggest cries was not just free education, but quality education. Quality education does not prepare me for a job, you know. It prepares me for life, to do whatever. It opens my mind. And that's one thing I'll always go home, the Township, I'll talk to my friends, I'll tell them. One of the biggest things that I've gotten from education was not the paper. That I use it here and there. What I've gotten there was the exposure, was the opportunity to see a different way of thinking from somebody else. You know, was an opportunity to see a different way of living from somebody else. And I think that does so much, you know. And I think if we start there from the education point of view, we will get one. But you can't do that without having the, you know, the economical faculties as well, you know, back those things up. And I think so. It's a lot of work, you know. And that's why I'm saying is that we have to look at this system, you know, of this pill that is diagnosed to Africa, if it's working. And I think if those that are administering that pill are comfortable with it, there'll be less reliance.
And who appointed them as doctors?
You know,
when we come back, we will finally do our final leg. But I want to pick up with him in terms of careers within the greater space of research. And what sort of job opportunities for the young people that are out there who are sitting around maybe looking at him and say, you also want to work in his space. What sort of opportunities are in that space and what must you prepare for? I know most of you are going to be preparing for your matric and etc. How can you also end up in this space where he's functioning from? My guest is Vaughan Perry, your host, Maponga J. Program is Sankofa. Don't go away. We'll be back right after the break.
Hello. Being a legal practitioner in South Africa in these challenging times demands lawyers that will help clients beyond legal issues. The ever-changing demands in commerce and tourism require lawyers who have sound and clear business and commercial knowledge, and that's where BHsc Incorporated comes in. Our business, mining, tourism, health, labor, and economic knowledge encapsulated with law and litigation experience gives us an advantage in the legal sphere. Our experience in assisting businesses, government, and various industries with their needs puts us among many progressive and striving law firms in South Africa. Now, to contact our attorneys for assistance with any of the mentioned fields and others, please call us on 012-341-4187 or send us an email on admin@chabangu.co.za. BHsc Incorporated, where problems meet solutions.
Well, thank you and welcome one more time to our last segment here on your program, Sankofa. Maponga J is your host here, and I'm sitting with Perry Vaughan, Sir. They call him Sir Perry Vaughan here. And people love you very much, and I'm glad none of them asked you marital issues. So do you get away with it for today? But they usually ask, and some of them are still shopping and asking, hey, are those ripe bananas or they are still raw? Can we take some home for ourselves? You know?
No, I've escaped it today.
Today you escaped. Take us through. Some young people that are watching there may possibly preparing for their matrics and stuff like that, and they look at you and say, man, that job is cool. Tell us, what is the use, what's the function of a person of your career within a greater community of medical practicing? What is the role would you be playing? And if someone wants to end up like you, what sort of subjects are they looking at?
All right. So generally, I'm an academic, right, in the health sciences space. So my education came from BHsc, general BHsc, looked into anatomy and physiology, And then I ventured into a bit of forensic science. Coming from the anatomy, I ventured into the forensic science. So that's the thing about anatomy, is that, you know, you're just studying something, the structure of something, you know. So then there are different...
its applications,
you know, can vary. You know, you can look at the pathology, you can look at the forensics and all that, on the other likes. I, for a while, went through the forensics route, did that, found it interesting, but then came back, you know, into the more medical research and understanding different effects of things on cellular level. So there's also that space, the academic route, and you can do that as well. So basically what I did is your sciences in high school, your biology, you just need to have a love and understanding of the sciences, you know, because I think it's one of those things, you know, I don't know how many times I've sat in my position now, and I wish, you know, and I'm looking at a particular thing and I'm like, you know what, if I had a proper grasping of what I learned in matric, you know, maybe I would have been better suited to deal with this. So all those things there, those are the building blocks to, you know, to get into the space where you are an academic, or if you want to go as well within the field of anatomy, you can go the forensic route as well. Quite a number of applications.
Secondly, on that, I would like to pick up your mind again. We're confronted with the pandemic right now. And you are in the medical science space, in the science spaces. Where is the gap? I want to throw this one as a curveball. Wait for me on this one. You already have a couple of concoctions that our grandfathers have been using for the longest time ever. We have universities like Wits, which have laboratories and science labs, which are functional. What's the problem in terms of you as professional African biologists, pharmacologists, scientists, chemists, whatever you want to call yourselves, just looking over your shoulders, harvesting some of this information, like from Faraday, which is less than 3 kilometers from the university. Go there, pick up some plants that are there, bring them to the laboratory, like right now here's this Mshonyana, there's what and what and what. Where's the gap in terms of when people become professional, that they actually look at their own indigenous knowledge with disdain, to an extent that we must always be waiting for medications from an external source when we already have some form of... I'm not saying it's a proper light that is there, but man, it's a flickering little light that could be a solution here, could be a combination of this and that, which people have been using. How would a certain bacteria behave if we drop it in Mhlonyana? I'm being very primitive.
And it's quite exciting.
What's the problem exactly?
It's exciting to see. So I was in Mandela University in Port Elizabeth a while back, and they're working on a curriculum, you know. And one of the biggest interests is understanding indigenous medicines. There's a general move. Well, within the anatomical field, I would not really be able to comment within general fields, but there is a general interest that says, let's understand indigenous medicines. You know, because in general, besides how we could use it, you are going to come in contact with it. You know, if even within the hospital, you're going to come in contact with it because your patients are taking it.
Yes.
So an understanding of it.
They are mixing.
Yes. So an understanding of it is important. So in all space, well, within the anatomical space generally, there is this move and interest within understanding indigenous medicines.
I want to become more specific. Do you feel the academic space? I understand the interest. I would want us to discuss maybe intentional movements. I'm looking at budgets. I'm looking at proper research. I'm looking at allocation of doctorate students who are deliberately from the mainstream academic space, who are not as an elective, but like I'm looking at the Chinese medicine, for example, which has become part of mainstream. Do you feel in the academic space, I hear the word interest. I don't want to hear that word interest. Do you feel there is a passion enough and an active budgeting when you can say, okay, we have 300 million here and 250 of this million must actually go into terms of getting this and putting it here, so that 3, 4, 5 years from now we are looking at replacing generic medicines with etc., understanding ourselves better. And after all, I think these medicines and our bodies must be able to react to them much better. Environmental issues, natural issues, organic issues, and etc. Do you feel the academic space is ready?
I'll be honest with you. I'll be honest with you and say, and this will be my honest opinion, and my opinion truly is that it is not an active one. It's a very passive interest.
Okay.
It's a very passive interest into how that works. From my point of view and from where I'm standing, it's very passive. You know, it's there, and I appreciate that it's there, but we will drag it along.
It is not accompanied by active.
Yes, I think that there's not enough active work within that field.
If you had an opportunity of addressing either the Minister of Health and etc., okay, let me make you the Minister of Health just for 10 minutes or 5 minutes and say you are the Minister of Health of South Africa. What would you want to tell the country?
I think.
What would you change?
What would I
about
change?
South Africa?
What I'd introduce, maybe I'd try introduce is an education around for the layperson around their body. You know, if I may put it for you like this way, is that somebody who knows their car is better able to take care of it. You know, they understand when it needs this oil changed and the likes. So it's just maybe an education of it, because I think we have a lot of lifestyle diseases that burden our public health system. That
which can be avoided.
An education of understanding, you know, non-fit. This is how when you're going through this,
Don't
this
eat
is probably
this.
what's
Don't
happening.
drink this.
Yeah, don't drink this.
Sleep like this.
Simple things like that. They could alleviate a very big burden, you know, that can then help us then work and focus on these diseases. Then we have your TBs, your HIVs and the likes. You know, we can then put our willpower into that by just helping with an education. You know, I'm from Atteridgeville. You know, I'll go back home. You know, I'll go with my grandmother when I get the chance, go to the hospital. You know, with her or for her on her behalf. You know, pick up pills. You know, and I'll see. You know, I don't know, it's a particular day, and it's just a lot of old ladies there. And you can see that the health is very impaired, but you can understand that it is impaired because neither she doesn't understand, neither the people around her understand what is happening in this regard. Neither do I understand how to deal with it. You know, so how to even then compromise for this by dealing with diet, you know, physical activity. There's no education around that. You know, but you can see if this would be introduced, you alleviate a lot. You know, within the public health system, and then just the burden in the community.
Wow, that's interesting. I would have failed if I bring you on this show and I don't ask you the multi-million-dollar question, which always gets people sweating underneath their collars. You are the president of South Africa. Do you want to make them two, rather? You're the president of South Africa, or you're the president of Africa. What advice would you be giving yourself? What information? What sort of statement would you want to make? What sort of impact would you think you want to make? What changes would you think you want to impact, both local and international space?
Of South Africa, then Africa.
And yes,
and then
just
Africa.
two questions on South Africa and on Africa.
In South Africa, in true, I think maybe Biko language or Biko form. I'd really just would like to, if maybe a sort of legacy, maybe put in that fashion as well. It would be one where there was actual work done in re-establishing the image of a black man to themselves.
Like, the image of a black person.
You know, just making sure that image we just cultivate it back. Because I think throughout and the systemic oppression, we've lost that. You know, it's been totally shattered. So I'd like, not only just for myself, you know, because I'd like to be able to see myself as the black man, you know, that God has created me to be.
Wow.
You know, so I think that'll be the one thing. On
a continental level.
On a continental level. I think once I've dealt with the
local South African,
then I just want to take it.
Duplicate it across.
Because then everything else then gets solved with easy. When we understand.
You took the shorter route out. My guest Vaughan Perry here, all the way from the University of Wits, and telling us the best thing he can do for the African continent. He wants to rebuild the African black image, just to re-establish who are we as Africans. And it is of an opinion that when we tell, educate, and reinsert, recalibrate, restructure the African mind in terms of their identity, many of the problems are peripherals. And I'm glad he also mentioned the issue of the impact of diet, alcoholism on our community, and how this is affecting many of our children that are being born. And I've learned something today about bone structures, and I've learned something about systems also, and how this body called Africa is actually being diagnosed with perceived sickness and diseases. And we have all these foreign doctors who claim to be having knowledge on how to fix the African body. But at the end of the day, we are the Africans. And the change of this continent is not dependent on one person, but all of us working together as a collective What more can we say? But that we unite ourselves, collect our information, and let's harvest our indigenous knowledge and put it into mainstream. We can actually alleviate our social ills also by learning much more about our human bodies. We can eat well, we can sleep well, drink lots of water, sleep your 8 hours a day, laugh a little bit more, hug a little bit more, reduce your stress levels. Some of these diseases you're suffering are simply based on you because you are breaking basic human laws of existence and survival. On Sankofa, we look backwards and we see the future. If you could go to the past, you would bring with him spirituality, you would bring with him diet, and I like that part there. Your host here is Maponga J. Vuzijena Chigaramboko, Garamashamba Huda, Chirira Navana Vanji Wobgo, Zukuru V, Zana Muchena, Tiswana Matanga Gugara, Vanachigarama, Matanda Nova, Chiramba Sesera, Tambo, Paruare, Makumana Misende Shano Chuere, oh, without media source until we see you again. Have yourself a wonderful evening. Don't do what I wouldn't do. If you do it better. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For being part with us. Appreciate it.
Join me, Mpumalanga, on Inside Out on Galaxy. This is a show that helps individuals on how to deal with serious matters from the inside out. This is to help remedy the effects that depression seems to have in our homes, relationships, individuals, and even our communities at large. We will look at some of the devastating effects that depression has on media personalities, prominent people, and our own brothers and sisters. Some of our loved celebrities and musicians having had to go through depression and fought a losing battle. How can this be prevented and minimized? And what causes this? From the inside out.